Hello, my friends. This is Lada from Astrolada.com. And on this sacred time, Easter time, I have invited a spiritual teacher, philosopher, pedagogue. His name is Theo. You've already seen him once on the channel, but he's coming with an incredibly relevant topic, the mystery of Easter, the mystery of the resurrection of Christ, to talk to us about through the spiritual perspective. Hello, Theo.
Hello, Lada. Thank you for having me again.
People absolutely loved you. I hope this video reaches more and more people because you're an incredible source of mystical, spiritual knowledge and wisdom. And by the way, Theo offers his Foundations of Spiritual Science. It's a course, beginner course, 6 lectures to understand spiritual science. I'll put a link below. It's very affordable. Also, Theo offers consultations. He's also an astrologer, but he's also a spiritual teacher. And he offers consultations, which are extremely affordable. I'll put the link below if you're interested to have him as a mentor, as a guide in life. So with this introduction, you have the word there.
Okay, so everybody, I will start with the calendar of the soul. The calendar of the soul is 52 verses that every week something happens in a cosmic relationship of the spiritual world. And Rudolf Steiner brought that to words coming from the cosmic word, and he made it into the physical world word. And I'll read it now slowly, and we can put it below. You just search the calendar of the soul by Rudolf Steiner. You can find free examples on the internet.
And this is specifically for the first week of the year, which starts with Easter. This is the first week.
Exactly. So Rudolf Steiner says the cosmic year starts on Easter, which we will talk about now. So, when from the depths of soul the spirit wends to worldly course, and beauty springs to life on earth, then drawn from heaven afar, the force of lives moves in human flesh and unites with mighty effect spirit ways with mankind's core.
Wow, beautiful. And I'm sure many people feel around this time of year this inflow of inspiration and life force, like I did, like a new rebirth.
Yes. Yes. So, Lada, let's start from different side. How do you understand and what do you think that is the actual happening with the mystery of Golgotha? What actually happened there? Because it's obvious that I'm going to talk from the spiritual scientific point of view, but let's see a different point of view first.
I know the spiritual point of view because I studied Steiner. I used to see it before us. This is the time Jesus Christ was crucified, and then he was dead 3 days, and he resurrected according to, to Christianity. But what is the true meaning?
Yes, that's interesting. I know that most of Europe and how much of America are actually Catholic? Do you have any idea? Are they morely Catholic or Orthodox?
No, not Orthodox.
Not Orthodox.
Most of them are Protestant.
Protestants, yes. And usually Protestants follow the Catholic because I don't know from our listeners, not everyone celebrates Easter tomorrow. Many people here in the Slavic countries on East Europe actually celebrate Easter after a month.
Yeah.
And Orthodox and the Catholic Easter are different in different months or weeks because of a funny reason. The Orthodox didn't want to be in the same week as the Catholic because they know that the Orthodox is the deeper understanding of Christianity. That's what they say. But with the interest of being the deeper religious view, they actually moved away their actual date for Easter, which is the most significant holiday, not a celebration for Christianity, and how we choose which day it's Easter. Do you know how do they make the calendar, the yearly calendar?
It has to be after the first day of spring, 20th of March, the first full moon, the Sunday after the first full moon, and Orthodox does not celebrate it correctly.
Yes.
In America and Protestants, they celebrate it correctly.
Yes, the Protestants here in Bulgaria actually don't follow the Catholic holiday. They follow still the Orthodox, which is strange to me. But yes, so this is an interesting fact that a mystery with the Christ is being made according to a cosmic event, to a planetary solar event. And this is astonishing because people in religion and in Christianity don't really look into that point, as the moon is the one who rules when are we going to celebrate Easter. Easter is a movable holiday. This is the main point of view. Christmas is not is an immovable holiday, and Saint John's Day is also. Saint John's Day and uh, Christmas are the two opposites, and
Solstices.
the solstices, yes. And the middle point is Easter, which is actually not always a correct middle because we take the view of a cosmic happening up in the sky, which is not only related to the moon, it's related to the constellations and to other solar forces outside of our solar system. Rudolf Steiner mentions that few 3 to 4 thousand years ago, before the Christ, Easter was happening in the end of September, end of October, which is a very interesting fact, very interesting sharing that he makes. He mentions that then in Greece, especially in Egypt, they needed to relate the resurrection with an outward happening. So when in the beginning of autumn, going to the middle of autumn, plants starting to die off. They're starting to die. So they can relate to an outward happening. Something is dying
The
out there.
material, the
So
food.
I can start looking of and hoping for the time of resurrection within myself. Then they had a statue. They were making a statue of a deity, the solar god, um, Apollo. But I might be incorrect with Apollo. There are two solar gods in Greece. One is Apollo, the other one I cannot recall it at the moment. They had a statue of the deity, and on the day of the Easter, after again the full moon after the autumn equinox, they submerged the statue for 3 days into a lake or the sea. It had to be something deep. Usually a river didn't quite work out. They submerged it. It was a big, big holiday, submerging it, leaving it there for 3 days, and after that, bringing it back to the surface and really bringing the life within themselves again. But what they could reflect on is that actually everything was dying outside. So that was a more of an outside celebration. After the Christ came, he brought something specific, which we're going to start unfolding. He said people and initiates understood that it's no longer relevant for Easter to be in the autumn. So it went completely 180 degrees on the other side, and they started celebrating it in the beginning of spring. So being within themselves all autumn and all winter, people were really looking forward for the resurrection of spring, for all the plants to actually come alive again. So he explains that now when the Christ came on earth and he planted a seed of his own expression in every single human being, now this can be recognized in the day of living. Also because when we incarnated thousands of years ago into human flesh, people were going down on into the physical plane. The Christ was a middle point of the most physical expression of the earth element on earth. And after him, we are starting to go up into the spiritual world. It's going to take thousands of years, of course, but he finishes the process of
Invol
contraction.
getting into the physical.
Evolution. Yes, yes, evolution. And now we have to start evolving back again to our spiritual source. And when a person tries to reflect on the resurrection within himself, before it was outside in the world that we were trying to search, but now the Christ gave a seed that we have to look for it now. Another fact, Steiner says that it had to change is because a human being is the most thinking in winter. The whole energy of the thought comes and contracts in winter because outside it's cold. We're not able to do things. Our will impulses are stopped. And the inner light has to be born then. That's why on Christmas Day, the inner light is being born, the flame. And when spring comes, it's hard to concentrate, especially in summer, to concentrate because our will juices are starting to flow in our hands, our heart, more in our feet. We want to go outside. And it's a real art to be able in these days to manage your way of thinking and concentration for giving respect to such an event as the mystery of Golgotha. Another very curious fact for how to see, okay, how are we sure that the Orthodox are actually not following a better day for Easter? Rudolf Steiner says nature knows that. The event 2000 years ago stamped itself on the etheric realm. So all the etheric beings, which didn't forget how to connect with spirituality, which are the plants mostly and the elemental beings, they remember. It's within the soil, it's within the stones. They remember what happened 2000 years ago. We have few, I'm going to read now that on the actual crucifixion day, which is Friday, Christ's blood united with the earth, and there was a solar eclipse and an earthquake. So it was an astonishing event, and the earth even started shaking to express how deep and heavy is the thing that happened. The Christ actually, his physical expression died. This stamps on the etheric, and now they made experiments 100 years ago with that. They tried planting fresh seeds into the soil. 3 days before the crucifixion, 2 days before the crucifixion, 1 day. So it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday they plant, Saturday they plant, and Sunday. There were big rows of plants, of plants.
Yeah.
And they started to observe within weeks and months what happened. And on the day, Friday and Saturday, after months, the plants were absolutely miserable.
Wow.
They could not express their own identity because the soil still remembered what has happened, and they could not bring the etheric forces within themselves, because then an actual god in a physical body died for the first time. Not a deity, because a deity is something else. Our God, the Son of God, died. But then on Sunday, the plants totally opened up, and they were super happy because the Christ has awakened, has came life
So
into the etheric realm.
so
Sorry.
almost like the physical laws of the plants growing is impacted by this event, and in the etheric they remember if plants are planted during the 3 day of the death of of Christ, they don't thrive. They cannot grow. But
They don't grow,
after the
they grow, but
resurrection,
they are
yes,
very miserable and sick.
from the Sunday of Easter, the forces of growth
Yes,
become abundant. So
yes,
it's probably very good for people to start new beginnings in their life from
yes,
Sunday of Easter. But the way the Protestants and Catholics celebrate it, not the Orthodox.
Yes.
You said Easter before Christ. Well, isn't Easter about the resurrection of a God? Why were people celebrating Easter before there was Christ?
Because there was the resurrection of deities. There were still resurrection miracles before Christ. There were people who were doing. If I'm not mistaken, I think Orpheus also was doing resurrections and other spiritual teachers. But the resurrection isn't really until Christ. The resurrection was not really someone who died to be awakened. The actual occult meaning, and has been done even with the Christ there with his students, when he resurrects John, his closest student, he this was
Lazarus. Lazarus.
Lazarus. Yes,
Actually,
Lazarus.
Lazarus is John, isn't it?
Yes,
That's what
exactly. Yes, thank you for
science says, that Lazarus is.
Lazarus, who died, and after the resurrection, he becomes John, which actually is not being said in the Bible. This is searched as an occult fact after that. He doesn't really die. There was a practice in old Christianity that they submerge someone in water and suffocate him for as close until he dies. They hold him into the water until he starts fighting. So this is the actual submerging into the water. A water baptism. This is called a water baptism in Christianity, in old Christianity. So they submerge him, he starts fighting, and they take him out just in the moment before he goes away, because then he has a spiritual experience and he starts seeing and he's an initiate. You don't do that to everyone.
So he
You
goes
do
on
that
a
to
near-death experience, but only for prepared.
Yes, because other people going to the spiritual middle door of the physical and the spiritual, they might not be able to be allowed from the threshold guardian to go into the spiritual world. So those were not practiced with everyone, only with the special students, and only special teachers allowed themselves to act in these ways. And in such moments, he goes into a deep astral sleep. His physical body goes to sleep. His pulse goes down very much. That was a practice, and it's almost as if he's dead. He's not dead. He's being guided by his spiritual teacher, who can guide him by being awake. He can be because the teachers were able to be awake and asleep at the same time because of the higher consciousness that they could spread of the astral world. And the student was not able to do that. And people who didn't understand anything of those things, they were saying, oh my God, he's dead. Because they didn't have medical experience. They didn't know what to search for, the pulse and etc. That's why it was taken for in front of the uninitiated that he was actually dead.
Lazarus is dead, but
That's
he
not
was
the truth.
being initiated. Just like before Christ comes, initiation was done by burying people for 3 days in pyramids, tombs, whatever. These were not death places. These were places
Yes.
where they have to be totally isolated, sensory isolated. The teacher gives the initiate some substance even that
Yes.
in a comatose state. And during those 3 days, he goes out of their body, explores the invisible world, is initiated, sees everything, comes back, they open the doors, and he's resurrected, as they say. So this is the Easter they celebrated. But as far as I remember, Rudolf Steiner says after Christ comes, this is no longer necessary.
Yes,
So
exactly.
to be buried, to be the rebirth, the second birth, as we call it, the coming of Christ in the birth of Christ within you, can happen spontaneously and naturally by virtues, by good living.
Exactly. And the first example for the new initiation is Saul with his new spiritual name, Paul. So in Damascus.
It happens totally spontaneous on the road.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is that the big initiate as Paul, he was against Christianity. He was killing and sending his soldiers to kill Christians. He was absolutely against that. And even a person of that doing that kind of things, Christ appears to him in Damascus. He couldn't believe his eyes And this is the first time that Christ appears to someone in the etheric realm.
That is
And
the second coming of Christ.
yes,
See,
this, and Paul
right.
is the first one who lives the second coming of Christ.
It's
He
not like one event. Oh, Christ comes on wings through the skies. Everyone sees him. It's individual experience, the second coming.
exactly. So Rudolf Steiner, there is a book that I almost made for all the quotes, quotations, and lines, verses in the Bible for the New Testament that Steiner translates absolutely from the Akashic records. And when someone sees that, you see, you read something like, if your eyes unite, your whole body will be filled with light. This doesn't make much sense if you read it with the physical understanding. But when your two eyes unite and your whole body fills with light, means that your two eyes, you stop accepting the physical appearance and you start thinking and experiencing it, the
Unity.
world, with your etheric pineal gland, which is the third eye being called.
Oh, that's the two eyes united.
Yes. So not Rudolf Steiner, Christ actually talks about the third eye in this verse. And there's many, many, many hidden secrets in verses of that sort, that if people start reading and understanding with a spiritual impact on the words, it will be much more understandable. Of course, that's allowed for people who are really searching. So even if I give it to you and you read it and you're not interested, you were like, I don't care. So it's really for someone being prepared for that kind of a truth to sink in with him or her. So the first, why I was saying that, because the second coming of Christ in the cloud now, science can explain that the clouds are the atmosphere of the earth. The earth has its own atmosphere, and that's where the clouds go. But the clouds are full of water. The atmosphere is the edge of the etheric world for the earth. Atmosphere ends where the moon starts. It's a beautiful way of seeing it. The moon finishes our etheric bubble, and then the astral world starts. And that's the first guardian of the threshold, is the moon, our self, because the moon controls also our way of thinking and our reflection, the intellectual part in us.
Mhm.
So the Christ comes into the etheric bubble of the whole earth. And that's where Steiner says Christ incarnated. When he died in the physical, he came back into the etheric realm. That's why we see him in all the water becomes a very important element, the water into wine and other quotes with the water. And then all the plant world becomes extremely important for humanity to starting to be vegetarian, eating, plants, and also all the milk elements, everything made out from milk and milk from the mother and from mother animals are etheric
Substance.
sources of energy, substances. Yes, thank you. The milk and honey also, it's every word has a different meaning being seen by the occult. There was
Can
thousands
I ask you something? Why are so many people intolerant to dairy nowadays?
of milk. This is because of how animals are bred and fed, and because from, let's say, 100 types of cows, we are using only the ones who make the most milk.
Mm.
And those are, you become intolerant by first feeding an animal incorrectly, and then by using only one source of milk. It's like you eating only one thing for your whole life,
Okay.
but coming from an animal source.
But the dairy products, if properly prepared, they're a way to connect to the etheric, to the Christ energy. And so
It for children. So I was about to say that in India, again before the Christ, old initiates who were healers, they were drinking only milk and eating only milk products. So their etheric body was growing and growing and growing and growing. Then when people were coming to them, they were really able to heal them like Reiki does now.
yes.
That was a way of healing because they were feeding themselves with etheric source, and they were giving after that the etheric to someone else. They were not taking it for their own development. They were helping someone else. But again, after the Christ, this changes. And this
Now
is what
Christ is in the etheric.
now Christ is in the etheric. You can connect to that pocket between the physical and the etheric world by yourself.
How?
How? Oh yeah. There is a movie really, really good that you can see how that happens. The Celestine Prophecy. If someone hasn't seen the Celestine Prophecy, it's probably 20 years old already.
The books.
It's beautifully made of how the etheric world and people who stop incarnating and going into that pocket, how initiates actually work on us without seeing us, being happening in the world. It's gorgeous, and Christianity is related there. It's a made book by someone really deep with intuition. How to connect with the Christ, with Master Petr Danov, it's the Słonczowite oči, the rays of the sun. He has a book that he makes that's another gospel. He calls it the Gospel of Light, the new gospel for humanity after the New Testament. And that has been inspired by archangels and archai. And if you read how do you say diamant?
Diamond.
Diamond, thank you. Diamond rays and the pink rays. So the Christ hides his lower self into the pink rays and his higher self into the diamond rays. Those are verses extracted from the Bible and put in a very special sequence that when you read it, you might not understand the sequence because it's very strange. At some point, he's in the sea, then he's somewhere else, then John says something. It looks very strange. But the actual impact of those words is like a mantra. It's like the modern mantra based in New Testament language. And it's really important that there is no intellectual explanation within those words for them to work. So it doesn't work on your intellect. It works directly on your spirit, and it works. And Steiner says, people who are prepared, they can read and meditate for 10, 20 years. They might even not gain any
Experience.
anything. Yes, any not spiritual impact. But he says, but in their next incarnation, almost surely they will be able to understand their spiritual events, to be in contact with spiritual beings. He says other people might not, only 5, 10 years, and then they will start opening their etheric eyes. But the thing is, there's people having etheric vision in the world, but they don't know that. And there's a lot of people of that sort, just because they don't understand the spiritual language. They feel something, they think something, but because they're closed in the intellectual materialism of the world, they say, oh, that's nothing. Oh, no, that's not real. And they push down their own powers because there's no one for them to explain it to them. They cannot ask the right question for
I think
themselves.
they have mental health problems.
Exactly. Yes. And Steiner mentions that in the future, there will be a lot of people feeling sick and having those nervous breakdowns because they cannot relate to the physical and the etheric world. They're not sure where they're living because they don't have any preparation from a spiritual perspective.
So
because
it is important to intellectually understand it, to understand the spiritual, let's say, element, to understand the spiritual science, so to speak, the process.
If a person understands normal processes of the world, the sun comes up, then all the birds come up. The cycles, natural cycles, which don't have to be scientific, then a person can relate those natural cycles to himself. Because another thing Petr Denov and Steiner mentions is very important for people wanting to have a contact with the Christ. They at least need to understand what a grain of wheat is. how it comes about, where it comes. That's why the bread is so important in the Bible. And the bread also means the way of thinking. Eating your daily bread means eating your daily prana, coming and feeding the highest energy using process in the human being is the thought. If nowadays not many people know how grain is produced, how a bread is connected with the grain, what even a grain and a wheat are they different because they call them grains, grasses. Wheat is a part of a grain, and etc., etc., etc. So the days of the week have a different grain. And Sunday is related to the solar grain, the Christ grain is wheat. And that's why the most popular food on earth is wheat, bread, and all the foods for animals as well. Bread is nearly everywhere. In every different culture prepared for different way, it's wheat, not rye, not oats, it's wheat. And there is a reason for the impact of wheat to want to spread like that, even into the material world. But then we started changing those things. We changed wheat, we start cultivating it for our own benefit, not for the benefit of our soul development. And then we developed gluten intolerance. The same thing is for the etheric with the milk. Because here we have the bad forces going against us, Ahriman is holding and grasping the etheric and wants to push it down. That's why all the machines are anti-etheric expressions of the lower forces wanting to stop the development of the etheric understanding.
So etheric, you develop it, it sounds to me, as in the most natural ways. Basically, the most natural foods, the most nature. You connect with the etheric forces, eating those etheric foods, like you said, which is the plants and the dairy and milk. And it's understanding natural processes, because as you said, if you explain, if you can feel the life force in a little grain, and you can, and a lot of people are so disconnected from the natural rhythms of nature, and that's disconnection from the etheric forces of, which are life-giving forces of Christ, basically. And is
Yes.
that why ether was excluded at the beginning of the century by scientists from the periodic table, from science as existing at all?
It's interesting because Steiner mentioned that the etheric being called by science is not the etheric, what he is talking about. It is a very fine substance which is higher than the four elements. It's if we want to see how would ether look, you would look at the fire, at the flame. It's finer than a flame because a flame you cannot catch. You can catch fire on yourself, but you cannot grab fire. It's very curious because you can hold air within something, but you cannot catch fire. And then it's even finer than that. That's why it's not visible to the human eye. And what you just said, I'm guessing almost surely that Petr Denov brought people into the mountains, into the nature, exactly because of that, because Christ is there and because people need to be in the rhythm. The etheric balancer of the body is the heart, and with the lungs, they give the rhythm of a person. And this is super magnificent, what Rudolf Steiner says, and they started looking, anthroposophical medicine started looking into that. He says the heart is a very special organ. It's a mix between a muscle with parts 1 and muscle with parts 2. Muscle with parts 1 are the muscles that we can control. I can control my muscle. But muscles with part 2 are muscles that we are not able to control. Let's say when we sleep.
Involuntary.
Involuntary, thank you. Voluntary and involuntary. Steiner says that the heart has both types of a muscle because it is hiding that in future the heart will be an organ that we will willingly pump.
Wow.
He said we are going to pump our own heart. And this is such a breakthrough in biology and medicine. They started researching in it, and people who took anthroposophical medicine, they took a heart and they started dissecting it. And they saw, I can send you a picture later on, and people can see it on the internet. The heart is actually a spiral which winds itself like a funnel.
Wow.
And every time it pumps, it opens the spiral, it closes the spiral, and it opens the spiral, close and open.
Wow.
And here the alchemical um, brother of the heart in the cosmos is the sun. And I don't know how many people know that, but the sun has two hemispheres that they change. They
Mm.
spin like this. Our
Really?
Earth, if it does that, it's going to crash. But because the sun is made of a pure etheric force and might, it's not a problem for it to move like that. And Rudolf Steiner says, people think that the sun is full of fire and gas and lava.
It's not
But
material.
yeah, if someone enters the sun, he's gonna go into a nothingness. He said he's going nowhere. And that nowhere is a place that exists. I'm guessing he explained it like that so people kind of break their intellectual way of thinking. What do you mean by nothingness? But the heart, and here the Christ comes. The Christ had his favorite student. Do you remember who was the favorite and best student of the Christ?
John? Peter?
John. Yes.
The one who
John.
resurrected Lazarus.
Yes, the resurrected one. And in the Bible, it says, I might not be quoting super correctly, the one who laid on the breast of the Christ.
On the bread?
So, of the breast of the Christ.
Bread.
John was the only one who was allowed to lie on the breast of the Christ on the day of the supper, because he was the closest to him, on next to the heart on the left side. So the heart there, when this sentence is mentioned, we should see why is he allowed to do such a sacred act, and why the heart is being mentioned. I mean the breast where the heart is. Here, two things are mentioned. Leo, who rules the chest, also with Cancer, but Leo because of the heart, and the sun with the heart related. So again, the solar god, the solar day, yeah, the solar god who we have, and that Leo comes up. The four evangelists who write the
Testaments. The New
the
Testament.
Gospels
Mhm.
are the four fixed signs of the astrology. And here the line comes up one time. Matthew, we have who is Aquarius. We have Mark. Let's jump before Mark. We have Luke, who is Taurus. We have Mark and John. And here things switch a little bit. John is actually Scorpio, but the risen Scorpion. So he becomes
The dove, the Holy Spirit,
he becomes the ego, yeah, the white dove.
the white dove,
Yes,
the,
the
the
white
high
dove.
vibrate. So the Scorpio, let me just say to people, Scorpio has three manifestations and three symbols throughout ancient times. The Scorpion, the unregenerated energy of the passions, then the ego, and the highest one is the dove, and that's that's John.
And from what I know from anthroposophy is that the ego was first.
Mhm.
Then Adam and Eve came, the sin into the scorpion, and
Passions, yeah.
yes, the passions. And the scorpion and the snake sometimes are together related because of the tail of the snake.
Yes.
And then it goes the white dove of the being the relationship with the Holy Spirit. That's why a white dove that comes to the Christ on the 7th of January, usually.
That's the energy of the Scorpio constellation, the dove constellation.
Yeah, being totally changed. And
Pure.
why Scorpio is because he goes into the deepest waters, and we know the eighth house and the occultism and everything. But Steiner mentions here because those four elements have temperaments: the sanguine, the melancholic, the phlegmatic, and the choleric.
Mhm.
Those are the alchemical explanations of a temperament of a human being. Steiner mentions that if a person wants to go with an occult understanding, he needs to have melancholy within himself. He has to be able to go deeply within himself and to almost get depressed because he understands the world so much that he saddens himself. Like there is so much pain in the world. I understand it and I cannot do anything about it. Even if I try helping people, they need to go through that themselves. And some teachers are allowed helping, some are not allowed. And especially initiates. He said initiates, there's another word also that they are accepting the sadness of the world and has to unfold within them so deeply that it goes into an etheric source of energy for them to continue helping. So the deep understanding of a melancholy, John, his best student, being related to Scorpio, because he was the only one then that who could really understand the Christ. And that's why the Christ allowed him then to lay on his chest, because he felt him very close.
It's funny enough that in ancient Vedic astrology, the water signs, which Scorpio is a water sign, with Cancer and Pisces, are the spiritual signs, the ones of spiritual liberation. And what you're
Mm,
describing is that the process of spiritual awakening goes through melancholy and goes
mm,
through feeling all the pain, accepting it, and despite of that continuing and helping others. But the ability to be so introspective goes so deep. That's why even Dostoevsky, or was it not Dostoevsky, who went through spiritual awakening? I forgot one of the Russian. He first went through a big depression, and it's part
mm,
of spiritual awakening, going
mhm.
deep sadness, seeing the pain. And thank you so much. This is such deep topic you're talking about.
Uh, do you mean Gurdjieff, maybe?
No,
No.
Dostoevsky, and what was the other big Russian writer?
Yes,
Tolstoy.
Tolstoy. Yes, exactly,
He
Tolstoy.
went into a big depression, and after he had a spiritual awakening, for a
Yeah,
year he felt pointless, saddened, and then there was this incredible rebirth and sense of meaning. And but I guess this is the process again.
yeah, exactly. And this is the very magical thing that you have to go deep within into the earth, under the earth, and then to go up again. That's why the this holiday of Christmas for 3 days is again going down under into the waters, deeply into the waters. And what I think is I had an experience of that. What I'm going to say now is that Pluto is the one who takes the sun and brings it down completely, deeply to the edge.
To the
The
dark night of the soul.
absolutely the only planet that can withstand, for me, not a planet, the only globe that can withstand Pluto is the sun. And the Pluto and the Sun are like the Capricorn and Aries against each other. Uh, and it's very curious because in occult astrology, which is given by Blavatsky and an Indian initiate,
Annie Besant. No, someone. Oh, the occult astrology. Okay,
yeah,
esoteric astrology.
esoteric astrology, yes. Pluto is super important because of that fact. I am not sure if Pluto was. I'm not gonna say something. I'm gonna check it later. Pluto rules Aries, but I'm not sure.
Yes, in esoteric astrology, spiritual astrology, Pluto rules Aries.
Yes, okay, thank you. So I was thinking, and this is it's. I'm gonna come back to the old Easter in autumn. Which constellation we have in autumn?
Libra,
Libra, and
Scorpio.
now it's in Aries, the Easter. Before the balance was between summer and autumn, and Libra was thinking about others. Balancing between not only between myself, but between two others. The Christ, the I am of the I am, Easter comes in Aries because with Christ, the I incarnates into the spiritual constitution of humans. Before the Christ, the only humans who had a self, a clear self, were initiates like Abraham, Aristotle, Plato, and etc.
And the others were more like tribal mentality, group think,
Exactly.
not individuated in a sense.
Not real individuals, yes. And that allowed for a shaman, let's say, to be the spiritual teacher of a whole tribe, because he was carrying the self of the whole tribe. It's like an animals now for the astral world. Now, not every animals don't have a self. They have a common self, which flies above them into the ether of the earth. And the Christ incarnates this for every human being to be able to be a separate. And then the angel comes and can grab a whole human being. Before that, our guardian angels were not as closely related to us. Before that, there was an archangel of the whole tribe who was holding, and angels were flying between people and people. But Christ allows really to have an individual fixed to our spiritual development. Of course, again, for initiates, it was different. People who were developing quicker than others. And this is also why it had to move from autumn to spring, because of the eye. And now this is what we have the biggest problem, is because the eye becomes the ego and it goes lower for its own understanding. Some people need, the Aries usually needs to hit something to understand its ego. And that's why having bad experiences help us to self-reflect and self-understand. So it really is a little bit, you have to go into a hard life to gain a lot of spiritual understanding for yourself and for the spiritual world. Even in pedagogy, children until 3 falling down, hitting themselves, it's not a bad thing, because the eye of a child comes around the 3rd year and it goes a little bit inside. And every time it goes inside, the child says, no, I don't want this. And it starts hitting. And then you have the eye inside saying, I also have an opinion. I'm starting to understand what it means to be a separate. And then it breathes out and it becomes a good child again. So those things are not because parents are bad and the development of the child is like, oh my God, he's aggressive. The eye is trying to touch the body and to start experiencing the body, like for the first time you put a glove and your fingers go in one finger.
Yes,
And
like
like,
that.
yeah, oh. So the eye is trying to take hold of the child.
Wow, that's just such incredibly deep topics. You're touching on so many topics that we see in the everyday life, but they have such a deep spiritual reason behind. And
Mm.
that's why, again, if anyone wants to study or learn with Theo, he has 6 foundational lectures. I'll put a link below again if you're interested. The foundations of spiritual science, or you can have consultations personally with Theo from a spiritual perspective and esoteric perspective for guidance. He helped me a lot with advice for my children, because he's a great pedagogue. Pedagogue is early childhood education as well, and psychology of children, but also I would say for any kind of life uh, experiences, to understand it from a higher perspective. Theo again can, if you like his style, for me, he's a teacher. He's not someone who will give you just do this, do this. He would lead you to understand the higher purpose and meaning behind certain events. But sorry, carry on, because I can listen to you for
Thank you
hours.
very much for the kind words. Something I observed for Europe when I started biodynamics gardening is that a lot of people don't have leaf in their food. I think I mentioned that on our
Leaf?
previous
What do you mean leaf?
leaf, like spinach, carrot,
Leaves. Yeah,
yeah,
salad.
leaves. And salads are something that became very healthy because they're vegetables and they're raw vegetables. The leaf is the breathing organ of a plant, but it's the middle point of a cross section. You have the root down there, the flower up there, and the leaves make the horizontal, and you have the cross. Everywhere you have, if you see a cross, you have to think about the Christ. So when we input more leaf matter into our meals, we try to open up the etheric within our body to heal. Let's say not to open the etheric, but to heal things. And eating milk, as our previous talk, doesn't mean you're going to gain etheric, because for adults, uh, after 7, we should stop drinking milk. We should eat milk products, but not milk for itself, because the human in the age of 7 develops its first physical organ, which are the teeth, and then we have to chew our food. And this is where Rudolf Steiner and Peter Danov connect. Peter Danov says we have to chew a lot. And if you eat grains of wheat soaked in water, which you have the wheat, the Christ element, water, the etheric element. So we fill the Christ element with the etheric element, and then we eat it as a meal for the morning, where the etheric forces are gaining power in the early morning. And you chew a lot of this meal, then you release etheric splashes of energy within your tongue. And within your tongue, it goes directly into your brain, because there are carbohydrates that are being dissolved from your mouth. And the more you chew, the more energy you release. If people have eaten garlic, they know that more they chew, more chili it happens in their mouth. This is because of substances in garlic that when you chop it more, it releases more energy. And if you do it on the board, you're losing that energy in the air.
Oh, wow. So that's why all those smoothies people are doing, it's much better that if you just instead chew them in your mouth to
Yeah.
get the etheric substances.
Yeah.
Ethers.
Smoothies are for sick people who are not able to chew and to extract the etheric, and for people in a rush. But if you want to really extract and use the forces, you better eat less, but chew more,
Wow.
grinding with your teeth. And another spiritual teacher in Italy calls the teeth the etheric catchers,
Wow.
because they're really catching and dissolving the food, and then they work with the tongue. So you have the arimonic, which is the tongue, the sly tongue of seduction, and then you have the arimonic, the teeth, the hardest thing outside of our mouth.
I mean,
And then,
Luciferic is the tongue.
oh, did I say the opposite?
Yeah, you said, I remind Lucifer because it's the tempting force.
Yes, yes.
Ahriman is the teeth, the hardening force.
Yeah. And when they connect and work together, then you have the Christ impulse. Because Rudolf Steiner says, being in the middle of Ahriman and Lucifer is the Christ. He is the middle point of the scales. But if you put weight on the middle point, nothing happens. So if you want to balance yourself with the Christ, first you see, okay, I'm a programmist, I go and work out a lot, I become a big guy, and I think about the etheric world. You're a very harmonic person.
Very
For me,
materialistic.
very materialistic, they are harmonic. If I want to balance that, I need to go and work with Lucifer.
Wow.
For him, he balances harmony. But for me to see that, it's my understanding of Christ. So it's Christ doesn't show himself. He's a very subtle worker. He works within the understanding of me doing that, not of the doing of the actual deed, of the understanding of the doing of the deed. And then Christ takes Lucifer and says, you're going to serve me now. You're going to serve me because I use you as a servant. I don't completely go within it.
I was just before we started this interview, I was reading exactly about this balancing act, how Christ is in the middle, and Steiner was saying some people are too Ahrimanic, usually they develop stiffening diseases like coldness, cancers are Ahrimanic. This stiffening, this is a hardening of anything. While other people that are more luciferic, the high temperatures, these are the also he was saying like pneumonia,
Yeah.
this is the luciferic, and he says you need to balance it. Say if you're too Ahrimanic, stiffening, prone to depression, prone to lethargy, lack of energy, this is too much Ahrimanic energy in you, no motivation, so you're very much in your head maybe. So he says you need to do luciferic things, and the luciferic things are in the essences of the flowers, the smells. But if you're too luciferic, you're prone to high fevers and stuff like that. You need to do
Mm-hmm.
Riemannic things. Riemannic things are, more like eating roots. And like he was saying, Riemannic force in the roots, luciferica in the top, the fruits and the flowers. It was so fascinating. And like you said, the Christ forces in the leaves in the middle.
Yeah.
Fascinating that I just came across that article from Rudolf Steiner. And how would we balance if we're too, can you give us some activities if a person is too on the Ahrimanic side, which is very Saturnian sounds to me. They're
Yeah.
very pedantic, they're very caught up on the small details. They don't feel much joy from life. It's usually
Mm.
very uh, lethargic a little bit, or kind of think coldness, stiffening, kind
Mm.
of on the depressed side.
Yeah.
How would you balance it? What kind of luciferic activities can you use? And the other way around.
So for both situations, it's always having a contact with nature. If you just go and relax in nature, it's would be a first step, and also having a breathing practice, which would be best if it's related to the breathing practices of Petr Danov, because they are related to the new rhythms of the heart and the solar system, than the yogic one. But if you're an Ahrimanic and stiff like that, I would suggest for someone to study mineralogy or to become interested in minerals, because that's a natural source of an Ahrimanic, but a natural source of an Ahrimanic. So that would be an easier step than to say, "Oh, just go and do some dancing." A person of a very Saturnian part would say, "Oh, I'm never going to dance.
Yeah.
Even if it's going to help me, I'm never going to do it."
Yes. Yes.
So a small step would be study mineralogy, go in nature, or start eating foods. Eat more fruits. Eat more fruits than what you do usually, because usually people with that kind of a behavior, they will eat more already made food. Fruit isn't already made because you just need to eat it. So just start with that. Put one more color in your room. Buy a colorful clothing, at least one, a brighter blue, because usually it's black, white, and dark blue, and the gray, brown. Those are the colors with aromatic people that they just put one more color in you, and then put another one. Buy socks with a different color. Bring color and arts within your life.
Arts. So this is
Art.
our art is more like Luciferic, isn't it?
Yes. Art is always bringing Ahrimanism out with Lucifer on the high end.
Balances it.
Yeah. Sports is not going to do that. If it's a sports for Lucifer, it would be badminton, the one that you play with a feather
Mhm.
that flies, or swimming, doing swimming. Swimming is going to etherize
Mm.
you and help you in this manner.
What if you're the opposite? If you're someone who is more Luciferic, usually these are a bit less mature people. Well, the very Arianic, they're like old. You might be
Yeah.
15 and be like an old person. Lucifer,
Yeah.
they're flighty, they're excitable, they're mystical, they're impractical, they're very artistic,
Yeah.
And that one extreme again, you're too Luciferian, you're not practical, you're not realistic, you're gone with the fairies, basically. You're irresponsible person. How can you balance that out? What would you introduce?
And the lowest scale again is having a rhythm and things that you do daily.
Get a
Yeah,
routine,
like
like
routine.
nature rhythm as well.
Yes, but
Get.
if you even for people like that, they might not brush their teeth every day. They say,
I'm
"Oh
very
no,
Luciferian. I'm
yeah,
super.
I'm tired. I'm tired." Even if you brush your teeth every day, it's gonna start helping you. Or at least having lunch always at between 12 and 2 o'clock.
I never have a time for having lunch, for waking up, for it's like never any. I'm super like flying
Yeah,
away with so routines that will
yeah, putting a routine.
very.
Yeah, that would structure a little bit. And putting your belongings into order at home. Yes, not, let's say, just start with your cupboard, not your whole house. At least your wardrobe. put it into order. Or your bed every morning, put it into order.
I have someone doing that every day for me.
Yeah. If you're a man, even brushing your hair every morning, every evening, this is going to did give structure to your hair, you
Gee,
know. Yeah. It's always going back to something that you can hold on, because Lucifer is a cloud. He doesn't hold to anything, he just moves
the
everywhere.
mystical, the artistic,
Yeah.
the inspirational.
So trying to put those things back on earth somehow, even if you work with a spade, just once a week, go
In the
outside
garden. Yeah.
in the garden, yeah, or buy some rocks and have them at home, some precious stones, and just hold them, just feel their structure, having a contact with something solid.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So
Uh,
by doing those things, actually, people are working towards Christ
yeah,
principle.
yeah, exactly.
Not just, oh, have better routines, be more organized. If you're, messy, you're more luciferical. If you're too like routinized every day, do the same thing, like go dancing, do something spontaneous, whatever it's more you actually doing active steps through that to reach Christ, to
Yeah,
experience Christ. It's
yeah.
not something to
Well,
make your life better. It's a
yeah,
spiritual work, this
yeah.
kind of.
One of the 6 exercises that Rudolf Steiner gives for developing of the the 12 petal lotus flower, the heart chakra. One of the exercises is, he says, every day do something, let's say do this, but the same time, let's say at 2 o'clock and 9 minutes, every day I'll do this, but without looking at the clock.
Start
So
with
at 2 o'clock, I start thinking, oh, I think it's around 2 o'clock. So I do it. Then I look at the watch and say, oh no. So I continue doing my stuff, and after 5 minutes, oh my God, I have to do it. And then I start catching time.
and
I
rhythm.
start to sense what time is. And then I start, if I develop a sense to that, then I can start developing a sense of what an etheric deed would be. So
What am I
having a
hearing? What?
deed,
The-
deed happening, because those things that we just mentioned are really scratching the surface of something Christ-like.
Mhm.
Already the new meditations that are given by Rudolf Steiner and Peter Danoff are real deep meditations of sensing the Christ within. There's a Rosicrucian meditation that he gives, imagining within yourself a cross, a black cross with 7 red roses around the middle of the cross. And on the top there is 1 rose, and then the other 6. And just seeing that and holding it within your mind.
So this is also work towards developing the heart chakra, which is accessing the Christ and etheric.
Yes, this is actually trying to really
To
connect with
visualize, to have
you, visualize. Yes.
visualize, to
It,
feel the rhythm of nature. And some people are naturally, they just know when time is, what they would like say it's 3:15. These people are already aligned to the natural etheric energies with their heart chakra, and they feel this uh,
yeah,
even without going to church and praising Christ. It's
yes,
as you
yes,
can see, spiritual science is way above that. You're
yes,
doing, you might be going closer to Christ just by being more in tune with the natural cycles of the of nature, by being, by even feeling the time better, by, if you're doing certain activities like putting more color into your life, if you're too glum, or the opposite, putting more routine into your life if you're too flighty. It's, and these are spiritual practice. Well, I absolutely love this knowledge, because it means that we almost every day, daily, people that try to self-improve themselves are actually working towards the etheric Christ.
exactly. So people, they don't need to, it's not always better if they understand what they do, because Rudolf Steiner says that within our day, we need to dream and sleep. That's the fish, the Pisces. You dream within. When you see, when you have a clairvoyance, you have to be in a dreamy state, not by doing something, but to be open, not to be completely in your intellect, because the heart organ,
Feels it.
he calls it the heart thinking. And recently science found out that there is a part of a brain down with next to the heart, which has a lot of things that it does. And it's related with the glands, of course, here. We start sensing with the heart. So it's the nervous system and the heart blood system really merging together when you start sensing the space in that way. That's why it's a real circulation between the heart and the pineal and the pituitary gland. Dreaming within the sensing and then stopping within the dream and reflecting on what happened, and then going back again into the dreamy state of sensing the world.
So it's not about always being cold, stone sober, and analyzing every activity we do. It's the flexibility between entering from this state into a dreamy, imaginative state. That is, this is access to the Christ principle, and
Yeah,
it's not just one or a hardcore realist. Everything is like you know, well, or the other is like sleeping through your day,
yeah,
basically
yeah,
automatic.
yeah. The super consciousness that they call it, being very conscious about every deed, is going very aromatic. It's going deeply into Armanism, or going after that into meditation and really feeling the world is going back into Lucifer. It's really a rhythm between those two, that when you go deeply to analyze, then you look at your analysis away and try to feel your analysis.
So Ariman is very thinking, Lucifer is very feeling, and Christ is the meeting of feeling and thinking. And
Steiner calls it the will, you know,
Christ is
a living will, because those meditations, like having the rose cross within your mind, he says that kind of thoughts are not thoughts. You are willing something into the world through your thought.
yes.
So in old Greek language, a word translated as a thing. So when you say a word, you are making a real thing. Let's say if I say a cupboard, it's coming out. And you are making a cupboard when you say it. So that's why when you speak, you're making things. It's a connection between will and feeling here with the larynx, between feeling and thinking. It's a will impulse of the future that we are going to make things out of words. That's why it's always the word.
Like some yogis now, they can materialize things with.
Yeah, I think there was a guy who was materializing emeralds from his mouth. Sai
Mm.
Baba.
That will be something we can do in the future. So Christ is basically the middle principle, the heart. And just
Yeah,
like Christ is the rhythms, just like the heart has a rhythm. Christ energy is to be able to feel into the rhythms of life, uh, and to be one with those rhythms. I
yeah.
it's not, this is way
And
beyond, what we think a religious person is. This is so much more alive, so much more, makes so much more sense to me.
mm,
Such
and
really.
it really relates to the cosmic rhythm. It's not only on the earthly natural rhythm, it's really the cosmic rhythms of the sun, what happens with the planets, even beyond the solar system because of the constellations.
Because
And
someone who lives astrology in their soul, even without looking at transits and charts, they feel, oh, there must be a Mars transit now happening,
yes,
or
yes,
oh, there must be, oh, that's very Saturn. They feel it already. So that's why the astrology is the science of light and the sun and the cosmos. So that's again
yes,
putting you closer to God to feel those energies, to Christ.
yes, because there was apocryph gospels and books of the Old Testament that were not put inside, uh, where the person talks about all the planets related with the hierarchies. And this is a no-brainer that astrology was a very important part of Christianity and all the mystery schools. And when you feel Mars, let's say, is retrograde or something, but you just feel it, then you're relating to the beings on Mars, which are the will spirits.
Mm-hmm.
The I'm not going to say names because I don't want to have a mistake misleading someone, but the will spirits. So we're actually making relationship to the physical expression of the planet, but to the spiritual beings behind it. And
Absolutely.
then you're making a relationship, and having a relationship is much more memorable as a feeling, as an understanding, than as a pure concept. Oh, Mars, yes, machines or nails or fighting. No, I remember this moment where I was completely shaken down and I had a fight with someone. So you really feel that the beings are living within the deeds.
Wow.
They are deeds. He says the seraphim and the cherubim, the highest spirits before Christ, they live in color and in sound. And every time you experience the color, you're experiencing the cherubim.
Wow.
And when you start thinking, just having this thing in your mind, okay, now I'm looking at the expression of this being on a very low, then I'm making a contact with the being. I'm I'm saying, I see you, because it sees you all the time.
Then the world becomes magical.
Yes, and then the world becomes alive, and then you are within the etheric world.
Then that's your connection, the Christ being
Yes,
born within you. So it's being very mindful as well, but also imaginatively experiencing with your heart the most mundane things of nature. The
yes.
wind, which also has beings, the colors, the colors and the sounds, they're the highest principles before Christ. You said cherubim, seraphims, music, the birds, the singing birds, and connecting with something more sacred and higher than the entities above those. Just such observations again, meditations, would you call it, or connect you to the etheric. Thank you so much. I know that you have to go now. Theo, I can literally speak with you for hours and hours. And I don't even know how to call this video because we touched on so many things. Maybe you'll give me some idea. But I'm absolutely fascinated by the deep philosophical and spiritual principles that you explain in such a easier to understand and simple way, which is so necessary for us nowadays. Thank you for your knowledge, for your light. And again, if anyone wants to connect with Theo, I'm putting a link below. Happy Easter. May the Christ be born within you. May this heart, this is the Christ, the heart center, awaken and experience the world around you. And any closing words if you want to say.
I just wish for a bright and lightful Easter to everyone.
Thank you so much.